All right, we will get started. Thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Tanner Brushwine, Director of Customer Success here at Spark. And today we're going to be covering actually two releases, 7.8.3, which went out a couple of weeks ago, and 7.8.4, which we are actually going to be pushing back 1 week until next weekend. So it'll actually be scheduled for July the 9th. As always, it'll be roughly 9 p.m. On that Saturday that we will go ahead and do that release, and Spark environments will be down shortly during that time. Apologize for the inconvenience if folks are excited about anything that's on that release, but we just wanted to make sure that it's as stable as possible and we're not just introducing more stress into your life by rushing something a little bit too quickly. So apologies on that, but it will be in there in a week's time. So as always, our agenda, we're going to run through what's new in these two releases, what's changed, what's fixed. I will do a brief demo, and we are always available to answer any questions that arise during our time together. So first, what is new? We are making some slight changes to the cadence of Spark release webinars. So we're going to continue to release every 6 to 8 weeks as we've done. We want to move very quickly and introduce new features as often as possible based on the feedback that we get from you, our customers. We will always release notes. We'll distribute those with each release. You can find those at updates.lendwithspark.com. They are also always in the top right in the little question mark in Spark. We will always link release notes in Spark so you can access it directly. The only thing that we are going to be changing is we're going to have webinars just a little bit less often. And you may have noticed that we did not do a webinar with 7.8.3, and we'll be holding those for only more significant releases. When we have 3 digits in a release, that indicates that it's more of a minor update as opposed to 2 digits, just 7.8 would be more of a major release. And then the exception to that would be if we haven't had a webinar in a little while, or we've got multiple smaller releases, we'll kind of aggregate content and cover multiple releases if that's appropriate. And we want to do that just to make sure that any requests that we have for your time and your attention are well spent. And if we have a relatively minor release, we'd rather just wait until we have more significant content to talk about and have just a little bit more valuable time together. So that said, we're going to cover what's new in these 2 releases. I'll call out here in the top right of the slide which release this was on, so you can identify that this is something that is already live in Spark and you may already have noticed. And if it says 7.8.4, that's going to be something that, as we said, is going to be coming next Saturday, July the 9th. So first, task lists. We've made an update to our personal dashboards where we can now create task lists on a personal dashboard the same way that we can with a package list. Within that, we can add task lists just like we can with package lists. We can customize those titles. We can filter and sort by various criteria. From that screen, we can edit a due date, a description, who's the owner, who is it assigned to. We can add comments and attachments, update vendor and invoice information, and then if necessary, we can always delete those tasks. We made that change. One other item is that we can also, when we are viewing from the side panel, we can edit that task as well as view some historical activity. So I'll show this when we get into the demo, what this means specifically. But we made that change to ensure that users can organize their workload the way that they deem appropriate. And the two ways that we've included on dashboards to organize that workload is obviously going to be package lists, which we already had, but now task lists as well. If there's another way in which you'd like to organize that or organize your workload on a personal dashboard, please do provide that feedback. We're always looking for that, and suggestions are always gratefully received. We've also introduced the concept of a PDF template for a debt schedule. So if we have a debt schedule filled out, we now have the option to use the same, essentially the same functionality that we use to generate a letter of interest or a commitment letter, and just have a push button creation of a document that's going to be a PDF. And that would allow for us to get that document signed. So this is something that would require a configuration change, even though it was in that release 7.8.3, you would likely not see this as available unless you reach out to a customer success manager, reach out to support, or to me directly if you'd like to use that feature. It's very easy for us to turn it on if that's something you'd like to take advantage of. So we did that because we did have some folks request that we generate a document that could be signable via our DocuSign integration, and that is now something that is possible. All right, in our 7.8.4 release, again going out the 9th, we now are able to have a lender adjusted column on our personal financial statement feature. So this is going to allow for lenders to document adjustments as necessary while maintaining the integrity of that original data that would have been entered by an external user, whether it be a referral partner or the applicant themselves. That original data, that's still going to be used to populate Form 413 for our SBA loans, but we'll be able to show both items in a credit summary. So this feature is going to be enabled by default as soon as that release goes through, but it can be optionally disabled. We'll show what that looks like when we get into the demo. And we did that because we'd heard pretty significant feedback that this was something that analysts wanted to do, was to be able to provide some sort of adjustment for internal purposes while not making any changes to the figures that are going to populate that 413 and ultimately going to be signed by an applicant. We also are now going to support generating Form 8821 for tax information authorization. That'll be available as soon as that release goes through next weekend. And this can now be generated in lieu of Form 4506C. And I shouldn't say in lieu. You can opt to use both at your choice. But that is now something that we will be supporting, and it'll work the same way as generating a Form 4506C is generated. And we do that because it's a pain to work with Form 4506C. So if we can get away from that, we want to give people the option to do so. Another thing that we added related to tasks is that we have the ability to select an existing fee. When we mark a third-party report task as complete, we are given the option to add a fee. And previously, or actually today, we only have the ability to add a new fee. But now, if we have an existing fee, we can add that instead of requiring that it be a newly created fee. And that's something that's also available from the dashboard. We'll see that once we get into the demo, exactly what that looks like. And we did that just because this was an accommodating workflow where somebody was being proactive, generating fees ahead of actually marking a task complete. Another relatively minor item that we've added is that if we have a limited guarantor, we do have the ability to document what limits that guarantee. And if we are documenting in Spark, then we should just make it available in any of the outputs that Spark is going to put out. And we weren't doing that in the credit summary. So that's now something that will populate in our borrowers and guarantors portion of the credit summary for any individuals that are added as limited guarantors. So this doesn't happen all that often, but it's something that we want to make sure that we are giving you the ability to have in any of the output that you're having Spark generate for you, making sure that all of the information that we input to Spark is available in those outputs. So that's all that's new in these two releases. We still have quite a bit of things that have changed. So this one is going to make probably a little bit more sense in the demo, but when we have an external user creating an owner of our borrowing business, any of those individual owners that are going to have more than 20%, or excuse me, 20% or more, we're going to automatically document them as a guarantor. And so the reason for that is we want to make sure that we are, if we're utilizing an information request by documenting them as a guarantor, we know that we're going to be requiring them to provide information that's required for our SBA forms. That's something that we're only going to do for SBA products. So if you've got a conventional loan and somebody is a 20% or more owner, we will not be defaulting them as a guarantor. All right, this one's a little more niche for SBA Form 1920, specifically in Section N, which is related to occupancy and leasing. We are going to be leaving that section blank unless an applicant business owns the property that's in question. Again, this is only going to be applicable for SBA loans. We were filling that section out if there was any kind of a lease. So if a business was leasing 100% and it was not leasing it from an eligible passive company, we were filling that out and got feedback that that SBA would prefer to leave that section blank in that scenario. We've also added a new endpoint to our API. If you're taking advantage of our assistance tracking feature in Spark, that is now something that can be tracked via the API, and that's only going to be available on. That's actually not true. It's not. It is available on all loan products. Sorry about that. And you can find that at in our API. It's very easy to find via the UI if you just navigate to londonspark.com/API, but you can also get to it via the URL here. All right, what I think is probably the largest change in either of these two releases is our guarantor analysis feature. We've given that what we're calling a design refresh that's streamlined the user experience for guarantor analysis specifically within Spark. So we've made sure that the functionality within that feature is it's undergone significant workflow improvements, and that's due to some of the great work from our design team. As our design team is growing, we're able to go through those design refreshes, making sure that the various features that they're focusing on, we get those as up to date, as useful and modern looking as possible. Big exciting piece of that is autosave has been added to guarantor analysis. So that is now in the pantheon with financial analysis as two of the main features that do not require you to save early and often. Anyone that has worked with Spark long enough has surely navigated away from something without saving. So that will never happen again for guarantor analysis. And that's something that we're striving to expand that functionality as well. So that design refresh, we have tackled that with information requests for external users. That was a few months ago with guarantor analysis. That'll be rolling out next weekend. And so we're curious, what feature should we focus on for one of those design refreshes next? Going to put out a poll that should now be available for everyone to go ahead and answer if you would like. And four that we're considering is document listings, document placeholders and checklists. Financial analysis broadly gets the first vote, it looks like. And then credit memos, credit summaries, CAMs, whatever nomenclature you use, but where we're aggregating everything into that one useful document. And then information requests for internal users. We don't want to feel like our customers are getting left out, that we upgraded things for external users. We'd like to make that a candidate as well. So let us know what you think. If you have strong feedback on that, by all means, reach out to your customer success manager, to me directly, and I'd love to hear that. So within guarantor analysis, one thing that got updated is the concept of snippets. We've updated that general workflow for snippets. It's going to be a little bit different in that specific area of Spark. The core functionality remains the same. We just think that it's a little bit more of an intuitive workflow. So you'll notice a slight deviation from existing, essentially the path to create and select snippets is just a little bit more streamlined within guarantor analysis. So then touching on debt schedule, again, we do have the ability to generate now a debt schedule, as I previously mentioned, with the PDF document that could be signed. Something that exists today is that we can generate an Excel document. What we were doing previously and what we're doing today, I guess, until release next weekend, is that we were limiting the ability to manually generate that form from the documents page. Essentially, when I completed a debt schedule, we would generate that document for you. But now you do have the ability to generate and regenerate that document manually as users see fit. Another relatively minor change is that we have a notification that will notify users of documents that are uploaded. We were limiting that to only external users, but for our LSP customers, that is now going to be accurate for external users or your partner users. So if any of your lenders are uploading documents, you'll be notified just like you are if you are working with the applicant directly. All right, what's been fixed? Well, there's a lot. We've got a lot in here. And I'll go through these relatively quickly. Feel free to throw a question in the chat if you have anything more specific, because I just don't want to read this verbatim to everybody. Address lookups, these are now working as expected. We are running into occasional issues with specific addresses and the lookup feature. If we had a guarantor that we imported via creating a package from an existing borrower, and then we made that individual not a guarantor anymore, they will no longer flow into the credit memo, so that will work as expected, as will sorting task due dates on our home pages. That will work as expected. If you're taking advantage of a LexisNexis integration and we have an OFAC hit, hopefully that doesn't happen very often, but if you try to resolve that, that will work as expected as of our last release. We had a couple of users run into specific scenarios where the terms page was not displaying as you'd expect, and you couldn't pick your rate. We've now identified that, and that will not be seen moving forward. For folks that are working with our PayNet integration, we are making it very obvious if a score comes back as a 0 that somebody did in fact pull that score and there was a result, and so it will show NA rather than just being ambiguous as to whether that's even been pulled yet. And then we can now add collateral to a package from an internal information request as expected. We had a couple of users notify us of an issue there. Fix a number of issues related to copying packages. So if that's something that you do regularly, hopefully that is something that runs a little bit smoother now that we've identified some issues there. If you were attaching notes on a credit memo or credit summary or CAM screen, there was a specific scenario that would cause an error that we've identified, so that should work as normally expected. We allow for creating multiple industry analyses. If PayNet score is unavailable, we'll show 3 different scoring options rather than 2. Obviously, only available or only relevant if you're using our PayNet score. On our information request, when we were tallying up how many documents had been uploaded of the requested total, there were certain scenarios where we were not adding correctly, but luckily we've corrected that. And we've also verified that when our lenders are verifying documents, that applicants cannot upload any documents on top of that verified document. Last little bit, I know it's a lot. There's a pesky discard changes message that was showing up in sources and uses that might have been a little bit confusing. So we've removed that invalid message. We are also now applying placeholder naming conventions correctly to any document that we're uploading to tasks. We're making it just a little bit easier to use our DocuSign integration. So if you're DocuSign, if you've got an expired token, we're not going to display an error as soon as you navigate to that screen. If you mention the same person twice in a note, you really want to make sure that they see something that was causing an error, and we've gotten rid of that. If we delete a package, we'll no longer be including exposure in our total exposure calculations. If we also are now importing a contact that has a spouse, and that spouse already exists on the package, we won't double dip and add 2 versions of that spouse for you. That did happen once. And lastly, the second line of addresses we're making sure is populating correctly on all of our SBA forms and is being sent over to SBA correctly. So sorry for the wall of text there, but that is what we've got for this the PowerPoint demonstration. So we'll get into the little bit more interesting of hopefully a little bit more interesting, which would be the demo portion. So we'll pause as I'm getting into this. If anyone has questions, just a reminder that you feel free to throw them in the chat, and someone from Spark will be keeping an eye out for that, and we'll address them as they come up. But if we don't have any questions, it doesn't look like we do. First thing that we want to touch on is in the dashboard. And if I scroll down into our newer version of dashboards, we have the ability to now add from our add list, both a package list and a task list. If I add a task list, it's going to be largely the same functionality as it is with a package list, where I can customize the name. I can filter exactly what tasks I do want to see. I can include what columns I want to see, and I can reorder them by simply dragging and dropping if I'd like. And so I can understand exactly what tasks I want to see and what information about those tasks are going to be contained in those columns. So I've already got my task lists where I can see all tasks. I also created one where I could see only my tasks. If I click on any of these items in this task list, we are then going to bring up on the right the ability for us to actually take action here directly from the home page, rather than navigating to this package itself and then working through the tasks there. If I use the ellipses on the top right here, I can make changes to this task. I can assign a due date for next week. I can update a description. I can update the owner. And I can assign it. Let's see if I'm here. There we go. Once I save that, that is all now going to be populated in our activity that I had mentioned in the PowerPoint session. So I can always see exactly what has happened with this task in the past. I can upload or replace any documentation that would be associated with this task. If I mark it complete, then I do have the ability to add a fee to this task. And in the event that we already had, we had already documented a fee on this loan, we would have the ability to include that fee rather than forcing you to create one here. One other thing I'll call out is if I click outside of this right panel, back in our any portion of the main part of the screen, we'll notify you that what you're trying to do is exit here, and we'll make sure that you don't do that unintentionally. We can let you exit without saving if you choose to do so, or you can continue editing and then save and exit. All right, so moving on from tasks. A couple of things that we're going to show. First, with individuals, I've documented a couple of individuals, 3 different individuals as guarantors, 2 as limited guarantors, 1 as an unlimited guarantor. And so just want to show that in our borrowers and guarantors portion of our credit summary or credit memo, we are going to give you the ability to pull in that description so that any consumer of this document can know exactly who is providing a guarantee and exactly what that guarantee looks like. Another large piece that I had mentioned is the design refresh of guarantor analysis. So if we navigate to our guarantor analysis page, I can document via settings here. I can reorder and indicate that I want to hide somebody on a credit summary or credit memo. So if I deselect Penelope, I can save and update that, and we will hide their analysis from the credit summary. If I select update analysis, we're going to get into a little bit of a new look and feel for our guarantor analysis. It's still going to be a four-step process where our credit history is largely the same. Or if we are pulling credit, we're going to see summary data here. If I move over to a debt schedule, this will look and feel just a little bit different, but the functionality is largely the same. If I want to add a new line item debt, I can do that. And then I can use the ellipses on the right to delete that line item. Or to view more details, we just wanted to provide, want to make sure that we are using the real estate on this screen efficiently. And so there is just a little bit more about, is this debt past due? That makes this screen just a little bit crowded. And so we've relegated that to our ellipses here. If I move over to a personal financial statement, this is where things are going to be definitely the most different from a look and feel perspective. We've started with kind of a summary table up at the top. We do have a nice little donut chart over here indicating what is composing our assets. And if we scroll down to the actual table, I want to call it that we've tried to make this a little bit more user-friendly to ensure that we are populating Form 413 correctly in the case that this would be an SBA loan. And so what I mean by that is we have all of these different line items that will flow to the different sections of that 413. And so if we use an example as an IRA or retirement account, if I add that line item, we are going to be able to populate the fields that are requested to be filled out on that Form 413. And what I cannot do is simply adjust the total. And that's the way that it works today. But as soon as this new release comes through, we are going to force users to add different line items so we don't have to have that back and forth of filling out that form correctly. The other large item is this lender adjusted column. So I can make adjustments. So here I have had an external user enter $50,000 in cash. I want to make that adjustment for $25,000. We can see that from our lender adjusted, our assets are going to be $25,000 less than this total asset. So this second row is going to be all lender adjusted. Top row is going to be that original data that's going to flow to the 413 of the personal financial statement. From our ellipses, I can add a note. We'd say this is Bitcoin, not cash. And we need to discount that. And then I can optionally choose to include that as a footnote on the credit summary. And that's going to work the same way as adding a note to our existing financial analysis. That just comes down as a footnote right at the bottom of the table. And will indicate that a note has been placed here with the little red triangle. If I hover over that, I can see what it's going to say in that footnote. We did mention that this is going to be on by default. However, I can optionally select to not show that lender adjusted amount if that's something that I don't want to do in the table, or I could say I don't want to show it in the credit summary, but I do want to show it in the table. So we're going to allow users to make that choice and decide if they want to take advantage of this feature or not. All right, and our last item is going to be cash flow. This is largely going to be a cosmetic change as the functionality is largely going to remain mostly the same. I can still drag and drop my sub accounts. I can still include and exclude various periods or the entire personal cash flow from the credit summary. And I can continue to add and remove periods as necessary. All right, so that's all we've got to show with our guarantor analysis. I do see a question here. All right, the question is, if we're making an adjustment to increase cash or real estate, you'd enter as a negative. We would just enter the total dollar amount. So if we wanted to increase this cash value and say that we want to evaluate it at 55,000 instead of 50, you just enter the total dollar amount. So all we're doing is entering essentially an adjustment value for the total amount here. Hope that answered the question. If not, feel free to reach out to me directly and I can try to answer it more succinctly or more accurately if we missed it there. All right, so the last item that we wanted to show was that example of external users documenting ownership of 20% or more, and the fact that that is going to make them automatically be guarantors. So I want to show what that means. And so I've navigated, actually, I'm now acting as an external user, in this case, an applicant, but just a reminder that this could be assigned to any external user, CPA, referral partner, broker, anybody that is not employee of a lender or an LSP. We can invite them into Spark to provide documentation and information. So this is a relatively new activity. If you haven't seen this, feel free to reach out to support or customer success to make sure that you're utilizing this. But a reminder that we can request those external users to document the ownership of our borrowing businesses. So that way we don't have to. That can be cumbersome, especially if ownership is a little bit complex. So we've documented partial ownership here. And I want to call out that we can add an owner. I can document anyone that's already been added to Spark. So if we have additional folks that we know are going to be on the transaction, we could have added them previously, or I can add them from scratch. So that really allows flexibility for those external users to document ownership appropriately. So just for simplicity's sake here, I'm going to document Bo owns 25%. And we'll say our last owner here is only 15%. So getting us to 100%, I'll call out that we've only got 2 users that are going to be above that 20% threshold. And so if I then return to our information request as a whole, I want to call out that for those 2 users, Pete and Bo, we are now asking them to complete the information request that would be necessary for a guarantor on an SBA loan. So we're going to ask them to fill out a personal financial statement. We're going to ask them to fill out a personal history statement. And we're going to do that automatically so that it doesn't require any intervention on the lender side. So if we're taking advantage of that business ownership activity, we can leverage it to its fullest extent. And we can then, just as a reminder, actually have that external user invite this user to Spark simply by providing an email address, and try to take advantage of the information that obviously is going to be with those applicants, have them fill out and do as much as they can in Spark just to save that data entry from being done by folks on the lender side. So that will conclude what we've got for the demo. As always, happy to stick around and answer any questions that folks may have. All right, I see a question about the lender adjustment. So let me revisit that. Yeah, and so just to be clear, I want to say we're going to use this IRA and retirement account, what we've got in the lender adjustment column, by default, Spark is going to populate the same number. It's 250,000 is going to be 250,000. What we are giving you the ability to do is then adjust that number however you see fit, either up or down. And so instead of entering a difference, we're just entering the new total. So if I said that I'm looking at these two line items, 150,000 and 100,000, and I think that the total has been overstated by 50,000. Therefore, the new total should only be 200,000. Then all I'm doing is entering that new 200,000. I'm not entering a difference there, just the total amount. So hopefully that, great to hear. Sorry for not being clear enough on the first time there. Any other questions for folks? Yeah, to the notes populated to the cam. Great question. So if we hit edit note, that's going to be optional. If I don't uncheck this, that's a terrible sentence. As long as that's checked, then yes is the answer. If you don't want it to flow, then you can uncheck it. Any other questions? All right, well, for those of you that that filled out that brief poll, we really appreciate it. That's something that we're going to be making, taking more advantage of our time together, trying to solicit valuable feedback and understand where we should be targeting our efforts next and how we can improve Spark and how we can improve use of this time together. So if there are no other questions, we'll give everyone back some time, but thanks for spending 40 minutes here with us. Really appreciate it.